Okay. For those of you who haven't already found it, I posted the Zoom video that I took of this morning's class. So I posted that video in your cell as well. And I'll be it'll look a little different. So we're going to have this morning. We a lot of pharmacokinetics. But we do a quick review of how we use to establish motion and motion schedule for the drugs that we have. And do a quick look. We also talk a little more in detail about so we want to do that. First off, I want to also pick very carefully the cases for our LRA. Just a quick look here. There looks to be quite a bit of work. There are a couple of things that we see. Quiz, I found out the quiz does not work. Although they're not that pretty guys for the so it might be let's see. Yeah. Not this book, not in this mod. Yeah, they haven't done that yet. We were supposed to switch over this switching over the medical classes. So that's been put off. Pardon?
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
Medical problem child.
Yeah, medical hesitancy. And in fact, as far as we can tell, for medical. For your other class. Come in, Perla. Hi. So we will be making that sometime in the future, possibly at this point. But I'll I'm serious. And so we'll okay, we'll go from there. So I'll share the screen. All right. So there's a couple of assignments. As I said, we'll I'm going to have some handouts for you. I'm going to look ahead. Where was that? Okay. Okay. So what I want to do is talk just it's the usual structure. We have discussions the first 3 weeks. We have quizzes each week. We have a final. And there's bunch of worksheets and other things throughout the mod as we study drugs. We're going to spend some time this week talking about, as I said, a quick review of but what I want to spend some time on tonight and tomorrow night is anti-infective drugs. Anti-infective drugs, meaning antibiotics, antivirals, antifungals, to lesser extent antiprotozoals. You all remember from your microbiology class that there's a fifth class of microorganisms, algae, that has very little in the way of direct disease relationship with people, although there are some rare conditions that can be characterized by algae. The last class of microorganisms is called archaea, and those are ancient bacteria-like organisms that have no known human diseases associated. Many of them are things like methane at the bottom of the ocean, so they're not really compatible with people, so they don't bother us. As you remember, microorganisms that infect people are those that grow best in our environment. A temperature roughly 37 degrees centigrade, pH approximately 7.5. These things and a nutrient base that's similar to what we eat. Those are the things that infect us. Other things are not as much of a problem. And if we have to close the door, we close the door.
Try that.
All right. Okay. If we look basically at the readings and tools for week 1, I want you to read chapters 10 and 11, which have to do with pharmacokinetics, etc., pharmacology general, and factors that affect drug activity. So I want you to read those 2 chapters. We have a lecture that's based on pharmacology. You can look at that. We're going to go through a quick work on that. There are videos to watch, and so those are the things that I would like you to look at. The videos are pretty good. Most of them are fairly short. Some of them are animated. Some are other videos that we have are not. They're reasonably good explanations of how drugs work. So that is something I want you to work on. This week's work includes something that is not actually in the grade book yet. It's called a drug classification presentation. And we'll talk about that. We're going to pick a drug for that this evening. We have, if you look at the dates, as usual, what they're reading is that they're due on Saturday. As you know, my policy is Sunday. So if you turn it in on Sunday, it will not be late. We have a lot of A lot of other things that we'll be doing. There's the initial post for your discussion will be, of course, due Wednesday night, Saturday or Sunday night with the responses. The subject of that discussion is to pick one of the stages of pharmacokinetics and discuss it in detail. We'll go through briefly remind you of what those are briefly tonight. The drug classification presentation, we'll pick our drugs tonight. We're going to pick our case studies for the LRA as well. Okay. Okay, so it looks busy, but a lot of it is just links to videos. So let's start off by picking our LRA cases. Let's look at the LRA itself, and there are 4 case studies. Case studies are, as I said, a presentation of data, and you do basically the self process on the data. And you will note if you open up one of them, I'm just going to open up the first one. You find this in Course Home. So the LRA case studies are there. So I've opened up the first one, and you'll see that it has a lot of medical abbreviations in it. This is what you'd expect. This is out of grand rounds. You know what grand rounds are in a hospital? Okay, grand rounds are when practitioners comes into the hospital, they go through the cases of the patient. The term grand round sounds a lot more it's really basically doctors coming in and going over how they're doing, whether they're getting better, and making plans for what to do about it. Occasionally, they'll even get back. But in each case, we have the first 2 parts of the self object part. For these, there's abbreviations. If you don't know what they are, look them up fast. These are all abbreviations in your career here. Note that we use abbreviations in this. When you write up your evaluation of the patient and write up what assessment do not use many hospitals are banning medical abbreviations. And the reason is that there are some abbreviations that can be confusing. For instance, if you saw in a patient record the letter as part of their that can mean they have sclerosis. It could also mean consulting. It could also mean magnesium. So that's an example of it. Well, the list is enormous. I've got a list of and the list of abbreviations that are they can be using is relatively small. The problem is you asking people to remember what abbreviations cannot be used, and information first off, this is so keep it up and the easiest thing for help. So when you're writing this up, some are fairly straightforward, some are not. I remember the first time first time I was looking at my father's medical records when he was in the hospital. They had SLB on the front. Well, I guarantee you, my father could do a great SLB. But in this case, it makes total difference. So there are some things that we get amused at because of different things, different situations. There's only so many combinations of learning and we've used them all many times. So we, when you write this up, make sure you do that. So let's go back to the LRA cases, and you've got one that is an STD case, one that is a respiratory case, one that is a genitourinary case, and the other is sort of a little bit of a mixed bag. So there are 5 of you in the room, so let's have the 5 of you make choices. And then if the other 2 come in, remember, at least to be shared. So let's start off here. Okay, so Ellen, who wants to? Three. Respiratory. 3. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Layla? Okay. Now you can have it you want. Advantage of the last. Or first. Pardon? The 4th one? Okay. All right. So give them. All right. So do you understand what this assignment is about? It needs to be written up professionally. You need to be willing to fund it. You will be presenting the last. So we want to. Okay. Now, one other, if you look in the week 1 module of the class, there's something called homework and assessments. There's something there called the drug classification presentation, which we're going to open up and look at. Yeah. Okay. So the drug classification, there is no, there is a list of drugs at the bottom of the page that describes this, and the classification is the is basically what kind of activity they have. So again, I'd like everyone to pick a different classification of drug. So what are you going to do with this? You're going to define that class. You want to prepare about a 5-minute presentation about class. You can either use Prezi. If you've ever used Prezi, you know it's a nice little tool for doing really fancy PowerPoints. I'm not a real big fan of fancy PowerPoints. More effort to make them look clever than in actually giving information. But you can use Prezi. When it's done well, it's really good. Or you can make your own. I don't need fancy, colorful, or anything else. I just need information. I'm more of an information person than an artist. So you'll be talking about the drug class, what it does. You've got root words. You can explain what the class name means. You can talk about common endings. Remember from the last class, not endings for the generic names of drugs are being slowly unified. Older drugs don't fall into this. There are many drugs that we don't have common endings because they predate the effort to harmonize that whole naming process. So there's a whole list of things, important conditions, diseases, or symptoms. The class is effective, common side effects, and interesting facts about the class as you do it. Once again, you'll do a handout to give to the class for reference. You did this in Pharmacy 208, and everybody seemed to have a lot of fun with that. So let's do that again, and treat us like you're talking to a patient. So forget the putting the handout in doc sharing stuff. We won't be doing that. Just go ahead and put it into just submit it. Okay, so who wants to make the first choice for the drug class? Antipsychotic. Pardon? Oh. Who else wants to make a choice? Emily. Yeah.
I'll do the anti-Parkinson.
Anti-Parkinson. Okay.
I'll do anti.
Okay. Carla? Okay, if you in the first week there's homework assignments, and under that you'll find a document for the drug class presentation. And if you open that document, at the bottom of that document you'll find
No.
You haven't? Okay. So any questions about that? About that assignment? Okay. Remember, if you do have questions, you can always email me. Not a problem. Okay. So let's go back here, and now we'll talk about pharmacokinetics and pharmacology in general. All right. Okay. So what is pharmacology? In ancient times, actually a lot more recently than ancient times, up until about the middle of the 19th century, essentially all drugs were either derived from plants or animals or minerals. With minerals obviously being things like eating iron salts for anemia, that sort of thing. Yeah, that's you. Okay. But those were the main sources. This has been the case from literally from ancient times until as I say, late in the 19th century. You all know the story of the discovery of aspirin. Things like fevers, arthritis, aches and pains were treated for years by, for millennia, by using an extract from the bark of the white willow tree. And it was pretty effective, but it was also pretty nasty. It was hard on stomach. So late in about the 1870s, a chemist by the name of Felix Hoffmann, working for the Bayer Corporation in Germany, was very distressed by the fact that the drug that his father had to take for severe rheumatoid arthritis was tearing his stomach up, giving him ulcers. making him very, very ill. It was almost not worth taking because of the side effects. So he, being a chemist, decided to see if there was a way he could change the product, called salicylic acid, and worked on some chemistry and did some changes to it and came up with something that worked just as well, but did not cause near the stomach problem. Now, with he was this stuff was so bad that you couldn't even take food and protect your stomach. It was that bad. So the drug that Hoffman came up with was actually could be taken with food and not cause problems. And that drug was acetyl salicylic acid, which is acid. And very quickly it became the biggest selling drug in the world. But the secondary effect, and not what Hoffman had planned on, I'm sure, was he basically created the modern pharmaceutical. Because what he demonstrated was we could take these products that people had been using and we can isolate the active ingredients, some of which had been done already, and modify them chemically and improve them. At least that was the thought. Sometimes you modify them chemically and they got worse, or they weren't working at all. But you could work with these things, use them as a basis. And it led to an explosion of research after that. That along with, and this was a case of finding a chemical modification of a plant product. At a very close to the same time, Paul Ehrlich was working on trying to find a better treatment for syphilis. Syphilis was a major problem in Europe, and the long-term effects of syphilis are pretty nasty. The problem was the only treatments that we had for syphilis that worked were the salts of arsenic, which also is pretty nasty, you know, like pig. So what Ehrlich did was he started playing with this mineral and making chemical modifications, basically tying it up in other chemicals to actually find a drug that would target the syphilis organism, which is a spirochete. You all remember from microbiology, spirochetes are nasty bugs. So it was very difficult to treat. So actually a movie was made out of this whole effort years ago. And his lab synthesized 606 candidate drugs before they discovered arsphenamine, which localized to the syphilis organism, the treponema, and killed it. And so it was viewed as a breakthrough. It was actually used. It was given a marketing name, Salvarsan, and was sold for the treatment of syphilis for a while. Problem is, it was still arsenic. And so even though the syphilis organism absorbed arsphenamine, it died and then released arsenic into the body. So it was pretty toxic, but it was a lot better than the arsenic salt people were using. So again, we have a proof or a demonstration that we can take a natural product, modify it in some way, and make it safer. Around this time, we were also looking at improving surgical techniques. Surgical techniques up through the middle of the 19th century were best described as barbaric. There was very little. We had no. We didn't have anesthesia. Unfortunately, the records for anesthesia, which had actually been developed by the Moors in Spain in the 10th century, were destroyed during the Reconquista, when Ferdinand and Isabella chased the last of the Moors out of Spain. They destroyed all of their records, and we lost not only anesthesia, but cataract surgery and a number of other different important things because it was heating stuff. Right? So it took the middle of the 19th century before people started using things like ether and chloroform to knock people out and make them at least not scream and holler when they were getting cut the ribbons on the operating table. One of the things that we discovered was that, the hard way is that you stick a knife in somebody and their muscles tense up. Well, I guess, yeah, they tense up. So what was done was people say, oh, well, there's Wabane and Turbo-Tuari and other things that are used by primitive tribes on their arrow tips to stop game, to kill game, and it worked by paralyzing them. It stopped their skeletal muscles from being able to function. And when your skeletal muscles don't function, guess what you can't do? Right, you die, you suffocate. Okay, it's one thing, but it was something that was discovered by people getting shot by these native tribes with these toxin-coated arrows and dying rather unpleasantly. So we looked at that and said, okay, well, we can stop the muscle relaxation, the muscle tension with using these things, but they didn't work as anesthetic. So you give them this and they can't react, but they can still feel the pain. So we now use these things, derivatives and similar compounds. It led to a whole lot of research into surgical muscle relaxants and combined with anesthetics. And anesthetics, as opposed to analgesics, anesthetics really shut off the ability to recognize things. That's it. You can still see, you can still hear, you can even talk. Because all of the rest of your senses work. You just don't feel the pain. Your body remembers that it got worked on, but you don't feel the pain. And you do, even though you're sort of out of it, your body also remembers what it saw and heard when it was being worked on. That's why people will sometimes wake up after a surgery doesn't go quite right, and they'll wonder, what's going on, what happened. Doctors don't like that. It happened to me. And when I came out of it, the first thing I said was, what happened? Because I knew something was going wrong. And immediately they knocked me out.
Oh, no.
That's right.
Not today.
And it took me 6 weeks. Yeah.
Are you okay now?
Yeah, I'm okay now.
Okay, good. I'm just making sure.
That was,
Okay.
so, yeah, I'm okay now.
I just thought I'd make sure.
Yeah. Yeah, they were clearing away the surgical records. The panic veins about that. I don't
Oh my God. And they did tell you for 6 weeks.
And of course, if the panic vein full is Dr.
I slipped and I missed it. Now it's open. And
because there he is, he got started off as a laparoscopic procedure for 4 holes. And there was an anesthesiologist in there. Anesthesiologist with all that surgical rotation. Now I'll tell you, the last time anyone knew the skeleton, probably in the So there's my something. Fingers inside me, clamping off the vein, saying, cutting open, cutting open, cutting open. And then put the oil out.
oh, you poor thing.
It really did me in. And the nurse was hilarious when she changed the dressing a couple of days later on that surgery site. she looked at him and she just said, "Not one of Dr. Williams' better job."
Oh.
Okay, I'm still here talking to laugh about it, so, you know, that's fine. But it does happen. But you do know, so what has happened is we have a whole family of these surgical muscle that shut off your ability to control and voluntarily use, or even involuntarily use your core muscles. So you can't breathe. So they give you these things, then they intubate you, so they can breathe, they can breathe for you. And then they can slice away. And they have all sorts of them, from extremely short acting, literally less than a minute, to long acting, or very long surgical. You want something that can keep the patient relaxed, if possible, at least physically relaxed. So there's a lot of these things. The drug that the ophthalmologist puts in your eye to dilate your pupil comes from the belladonna plant, a toxin, in larger amounts. The name belladonna derives from the fact that the Romans used this stuff, and they put it into women's eyes to dilate their pupils because that made them more beautiful in the Roman eye. Hence the word belladonna.
So women were just always blind. Because every time I get my eyes dilated, I walk in.
Yeah.
Imagine how quickly they had to adjust to that. It was just that the main use for it was actually for brothels,
Yeah,
to be more kind.
yeah. I wasn't gonna go there.
So we have later. And that should not leave us.
And then, of course, the ladies would use it as well because they were rarely outside.
Yeah.
They were kept.
So, this is enhanced, basically, in the view of the Romans. But the other things that we have that come out of that we still use is digoxin. Digoxin is still isolated from the body. It is a very, very complex molecule, very difficult to synthesize even in the laboratory. And the manufacturing process would put the drug into thousands of dollars a dose, whereas now it's pennies a dose, because we can isolate it in fairly good amounts from fox blood. So we have lots of drugs that we have come from that originally. And there's a lot of work right now for a number of years. People, pharmaceutical companies would hire or contract with academic people interested in what we call ethnobotany. The going back into areas where tribal and natural cures were still being used. So they go into the jungles of Brazil and Borneo and New Guinea and find out from the local shaman what they were using to treat disease. And occasionally they come back with some really interesting results. Now, pharmaceutical companies will get changed because you can't have the natural. You
Isn't
can,
that how one of the asthma drugs was found?
yeah, one of the steroids, and I can't remember which one. But more recently, or maybe more famously, the original steroid for birth control was actually based on a product isolated from the Mexican land. Okay. So that was the original, and actually that created the pharmaceutical company Syntec. That particular discovery allowed Jurassic to start that company. But that led us on that path of then looking at other ways of modifying the hormonal pathway, leading to effective birth control. Note I didn't say safe. There are some problems with birth control. Well, of course, there's no such thing as a safe drug.
No.
Even ones that we think are really safe. An example of a drug that actually is about as safe as you can get is a virus. It's like the herpes. You can take a ton of that stuff, but there are people who are allergic. So there's no such thing as a perfectly safe drug. So anyway, what are the important things about that we take into consideration in a drug, and how do we look at how do we make decisions about drugs? And they have to do with the speed of onset, or how fast does the therapeutic effect start? How long? I mean, how potent? And how long does the effect last? All of those are important aspects. How fast depends on the drug and on the route of administration. Remember from other classes, the fastest route of administration of any drug is IV. You're going directly into the vein, and within 2 minutes, the drug is circulating throughout the entire body. The next most effective, or the next fastest route, is one of the parenteral routes, other than IV, intramuscular, subcu, or even transdermal. Takes about 10 minutes for the drug to start having an effect on the body. So, how fast depends on route of administration and the drug itself. Some drugs are a little slower and some drugs are a little faster. Mostly we can expect them to fall into these two ranges. Oral drugs are the slowest because they have to go through the stomach. The drug itself has to be released from whatever carrier it's in, whether it's a tablet or a capsule. If it's in liquid form, then it's already mostly released. That's a little faster. But liquid drugs also taste horrible. You have to mask them with something that to me tastes even worse. But we do that. So how fast depends on when. Remember, there's when you take a oral drug, there is the first pass test. Where does the drug go from the stomach and then a small bowel to the liver? That's the first place. What does the liver do? The liver is the main metabolic organ of the body, so it destroys some proportion of it, anywhere from 10 to 80%, depending on the drug. And so that's why oral doses are much higher in many cases than injectable doses, because we're going to lose most of the drug to the liver right away. Now, all the drug will eventually circulate through the liver, because the blood all circulates through the liver. And so that is when it starts getting pulled out. And the rate at which it gets pulled out has to do with how long the drug will last. So if we look at a drug and we give a single dose and we give it orally, what you're going to get is you're going to get a rise in concentration. If we look at this as time and concentration of drug in the plasma, it'll look pretty much like a bell curve. Okay. So this is a point of interest here, the maximum concentration and the time to that maximum concentration. So what we have is we have an effect as long as the drug is there. We also have something called a half-life. At this point, this point here is the point at which we've lost half the drug from the plasma.
Isn't that when
Depends on the drug. Okay. But the half-life also tells us how long. It also tells us how often we have to dose, because that's really what we do. We take a drug such that we overlap these curves on each other and have a roughly constant amount of drug in our system, because drugs work at a concentration. There is an ideal concentration for any drug to be effective. This is all determined clinically during animal testing, before we put it into humans, and then in human clinical testing. So we look at the half-life, we give single doses, and we measure the half-life in those times, so that we can calculate a likely dosing schedule. And so we do our dosing so that we can maintain a constant level of drug, roughly. Ideally, you'd have a drug that went that just rose up and stayed right there. You know how you do that? No, well, that way you actually still get some pulsing. That's an IV infusion. Because your rate is generally done so that you maintain a constant amount of drug in the system. So the IV rate that's recommended is such that it would give you that level of drug. The other thing we want to do when we're looking at drugs, if we're looking again at okay, we're going to say that we've built up and we have a therapeutic level roughly of the drug at some level. Somewhere, and then again, we do this during clinical trials. We have an effective dose here, and then somewhere up here, we have a toxic dose level. The bigger this gap, the better. The bigger the gap gives us a lot more leeway with dosing, but it also allows us to safely dose a wide range of people, because people are different sizes. And so we want to make sure that we have a dose that is going to be therapeutic. During the course of clinical development, when we're looking at efficacy, we look at doses and responses in terms of disease treatment. And at some point, we always want to get up to the minimum dose that will give the maximum response. And that dose can be looked at. If you look at a dose response curve, it will go up and it will level out. And even though the dose will continue to go up, you'll get no more effect. Then you are just putting the patient at risk. So the object here is to have an average dose that will give you a maximum response. So that if you have a person who is very much different from average, being way outside the norm, because people are remarkably similar, even though we are remarkably different, we're remarkably similar in the way we think of drugs, largely because our plasma volume is generally about the same. Okay, for adults, obviously with kids, it's going to be less. But for adults, our plasma volume stays pretty constant across people. So what we want is to do all of this work so that we have safety. Now this gap here is called the therapeutic margin.
I'm guessing it's not very big for work.
It tends to be small for that. Actually, those are closer to narcotics. Amphetamines and methadone are similar to opiates. So they're actually closer to narcotics. That's why they're all Schedule II drugs. Actually, things like digoxin, one of the most commonly used drugs in the world, used for heart failure, and it's used by every cardiologist on the planet because they effort after effort has been made to find a better drug for heart failure. Yeah, we can find them, but they're hideously expensive. Whereas digoxin, by comparison. But it has a very narrow therapeutic window. The issue with that is that cardiologists have been using this for 200 years. And they understand it very, very well. I had a neighbor when I lived in North Carolina who was a cardiologist. And he told me that digoxin was his favorite. Because he could use it he knew how to use it on patients from the very young who had heart problems. Little kids can have heart failure too, to the very old. And he could use it safely with it. It was easy to monitor. Another commonly used drug, morphine. The oral anticoagulant. Well, it shouldn't, because you have to keep your INR within a pretty narrow range. And if you get out of that range, and it's easy to do, because of course, the getting too much warfarin means you bleed heavily from rather minor injuries. Getting too little warfarin means you have clots and then have strokes and heart. So it's a very, you've got. So, excuse me, it's 7 o'clock. Pardon?
It does not sound like a good time. You take too little, you get this, you take too much, you get that.
But see, that's why they monitor. That's why people are go in for a blood draw once a month. Antihistamines. The biggest problem with antihistamines is their sedative effect.
Yeah.
From a safety standpoint, you can look at it. Yeah, if you're driving a car and you have an accident, that's a safety issue.
Yeah.
But
It's just one of those things, like my niece last night, we had to give it to her because she was having a reaction. She's so sensitive
Yeah.
that she'll have a reaction to just about anything. And I had a hard time getting her up this morning just because of how.
yeah, she was completely out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, antihistamines will they do cause drowsiness, and even the ones that are said not to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God, Claire not.
Different people.
I'm good. I'm good
And
with
then
Benadryl.
there's my wife who takes Benadryl and gets hyper.
Me too. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
I thought I was
Oh,
alone.
no, you're not. There's quite a few people.
My
that
husband
actually-
can't take allergy medication without somebody doing
He looks like he's tweaking out, and it's like,
Calm down.
You alive?
when I can never realize he's doing it, he's just standing there. He's like looking around. Yeah, he's just thinking, I was like, what?
I'm very confused.
So
I blame it.
that's the goal, which is to have a certain amount of drug to affect the therapy. So what happens then? Well, that's the whole process of pharmacokinetics. The term pharmacokinetics actually comes from a couple of Greek words that mean movement of drone. That's all. So pharmacokinetics Generally, we think of it as A, D, M, E. So that's absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. Sometimes mistakenly referred to as elimination. This all is after the drug is released from the liver matrix. So the absorption is really a process of getting it into the plasma. If you are obviously giving a drug IV, it's going straight in, so the absorption time is effectively immediate. Any other route takes a little longer. Absorption of oral drugs usually takes 30 minutes on average. Sometimes some is a little faster, some is actually, some drugs are slower, but for the most part, it takes about 30 minutes before we start seeing in the plasma. So why would we give drugs oral? Well, it's the easiest and safest route of administration. It is the route that does not involve invasive techniques. Okay, so it's easy to do. Most people can swallow medication. Not all, but most people can. So what happens then? The distribution is, where does it go? Well, where it goes, obviously in the plasma, it goes everywhere. But then often it gets diffused into tissue. And depending on the type of drug, it might go into certain kinds of tissue. Some drugs can get to privileged areas of the body. The main privileged area is the brain. There's something called the blood-brain barrier, which prevents drugs from which prevents things that don't belong inside the brain from getting there. So we have to trick this barrier into letting them get across, or they very slowly diffuse. This is why some CNS active drugs, antidepressants, anxiolytics, and so forth, take a while to show any effect. We generally think you take a drug within 30 minutes to an hour, you can start seeing an effect. Well, some drugs, that effect might take 2 weeks. That's because you need to get the drug where it needs to go. And it just diffuses there gradually through various mechanisms. Other drugs may be more likely to be stored in fatty material in the body, in adipose tissue, and other places where there naturally is a higher in lipid. And so the drugs will be sequestered there, stored there. But at any rate, it takes some time, and the distribution is basically throughout the body. This is why drugs have so many side effects. We have a very hard time finding ways to get drugs to only go where we want them to go and exert their effect only where we want them to be exerted. The next phase is metabolism. This is done mainly in the liver. And metabolism is changing the drug to get rid of it. The body does not like foreign substances, and drugs are foreign substances. The body responds to foreign substances by finding ways of getting rid of them. You get a splinter in you, the splinter will get surrounded by all sorts of material, pussy material, or anything else, and the body will try and kick it out. Okay? So it's the same with the drug. The body wants to get rid of it. And where does it get rid of it? Mainly through the liver. So metabolism is a process of the liver, and this is done through an enzyme system, a huge enzyme system called cytochrome P450. Cytochrome P450 is actually a family of enzyme systems that metabolize drugs of different structures. So a drug with certain kinds of chemical structures on it will be metabolized by one of the family members of P450, whereas another drug with a different chemical structure may be metabolized by yet another. There are a number of these. It's one of the places that is the source of drug interaction, drug and drug food interaction. You've all seen drugs that say you can't eat grapefruit or drink grapefruit juice with this drug. The reason is because the drug and grapefruit are all metabolized by the same part of P450. And so what happens is the grapefruit is metabolized preferentially, natural product, P450 knows exactly what to do with it. Whereas the drug then can build up its concentration in the body to toxic levels. And it's the same with others. A lot of times when you see drug interactions, one of the questions is, what subset of P450 does the metabolism? And you'll see that a lot of times when you look at mechanism of action or the ADME portion, a description of a drug, say in Hippocrates or the others, it'll refer to CYP, cytochrome P, 450, and they'll give it a subset of some sort. And it will be, they'll say any drug metabolized by is going to interfere with the drug we're talking about. Okay. So this is a source, one of the sources of drug interaction. So the drugs, why do we modify it? Well, it's modified theoretically so that they can be excreted. The two main routes of excretion are the kidney and feces. So they go out through the bile duct from the liver if they're going out into the feces, or they go back into the plasma and are filtered out by the kidney. Okay. Excretion, I say there are two routes, urine and feces. Not solely, some drugs can be excreted through perspiration. But most of the drugs will go out to the urine and feces. So you can count on that. So the body gets rid of these things. This is pharmacokinetics, the science of what the body does to the drug. The mechanism of action, which is something we're going to be dealing with antibiotics. The mechanism of action is what the drug does to the body. So we have diuretics, which are used as sort of first-line therapy for mild hypertension, especially if it's accompanied by any form of edema. Diuretics are given, and what they do is they stimulate certain parts of kidney anatomy to pull water and salts and other things out, and transfer it into the bladder for elimination. So we have that, or it may the mechanism of action for reducing blood pressure may be through inhibiting the enzyme known as angiotensin-converting enzyme. So that becomes an inhibitor, a blocker. Okay, so an inhibitor of the action. Drugs can block receptors that have a natural, what we call ligand, a natural molecule that actually activates whatever that receptor does and causes a downstream effect. If we block that off in a way that doesn't activate the receptor, then you block the effect. So that is in terms of blood pressure, that would be the source of action of the angiotensin receptor blockers. So there are a number of different routes of mechanisms of action that drugs can have. We have that is the pharmacodynamics of the drug, the effect on the body. But the pharmacokinetics are things we can actually we can see in real time. The effects of drugs on the body, sometimes we don't see very well because they're more subtle. Relief of pain, that's all symptomatic relief, for instance. And there are lots of mechanisms by which that can happen. The opiate receptors are one for the major narcotics, but the aspirin works by a mechanism that wasn't known for 100 years after it was discovered. And that led to a whole new approach to pain relief, the cyclooxygenase 2 inhibitors. There were a number of those put on the market. It turned out those had some nasty, nasty side effects like death. And so all but one were taken off the market. The one that was left on the market was left on the market because it was the one that seemed to have the fewest side effects. But also, they wanted to keep one on the market. It was recently taken off because we have better methods of pain control now. So we have lots of information about that. The talked about a lot of things here. There's a lot more detail in this than I've gone into. There are some things that affect the usefulness of drugs. One of them is the interaction of drugs. Sometimes there's no interaction. If two drugs are given, they can be additive, they can be synergistic, there can be a potentiation effect, or it can be antagonistic. Additive simply means you give the two drugs and each of them behaves exactly as though they were the only drug given. Okay. Synergism is when you give two drugs together and each of them has an enhanced effect. Okay. A good example of synergism is synergism that can have a very negative effect, and that is to take a drug like Xanax with alcohol. Altogether, too often we see that synergistic effect is that it kills the patient. Nasty mixture. One of the many reasons that anybody taking any drug probably should never take it. I don't care what the drug is. That's just probably a good idea. Potentiation is when one drug actually enhances another. There are some good examples, but probably one of the most common is a lot of people will take vitamin D and calcium supplements. Now, vitamin D and calcium supplements actually, vitamin D potentiates the absorption. Has no effect, calcium does not affect vitamin D at all. But vitamin D is really required. That's why people who take calcium supplements should always be taking vitamin D. I don't care what the supplement is. We talk about a wonderful oyster shell calcium. You need something to help it absorb. And in fact, it makes it possible then for the calcium to be properly involved in the bone rematrixing that goes on. Bone is dynamic, it's not fixed. We're constantly pulling calcium out and putting it back in. We call that recalcification, rematrixing of bone. And it's a strategy that any woman who, women are more prone to osteoporosis than men. The men get it. But anyone who is diagnosed with osteoporosis or pre-osteoporosis, osteomalacia, should be taking calcium supplements and vitamin D, not the the PDE inhibitor drug that they give for osteoporosis. Those drugs are turning out to have too many associated problems. Then there's antagonism. Drugs can cancel each other out. Lately, we've been hearing about Narcan a lot more. People are saying that the police should always carry Narcan because they get called a lot on opiate overdoses. And then they want the RAs in the dorms at state to have Narcan. That scares me, personally. I was a dorm RA. No way I would have wanted that. So,
That's putting a lot on some
theoretically, they give them the training, but you're right. That's my problem. It's sort of like people that say give guns to teachers in schools.
If the teacher is willing to carry it.
No.
If the teacher is,
If the teacher has been properly
Right.
trained.
That's
you
what
know,
I'm saying.
And
It's like
then
a teacher
I
that's
still
properly
don't
trained.
like the idea.
Yeah,
You know,
but it's like.
But
proper
nonetheless.
Training, yes,
Yeah.
but to put that on every RA.
yeah,
That's
that's just not appropriate.
No.
And there's arguments in good condition for both, because Narcan will reverse opiate toxicity. Narcan itself is toxic.
But my question is, when I was hearing about all the college stuff, that was always alcohol.
Mhm.
They were always binge drinking and then dying of alcohol poisoning.
Yeah.
So how much has the opioid stuff really touched the college campus?
Apparently it's getting worse. The largest, we think of opioids, we don't really talk about opioids. Because actually the largest group right now that are addicted to opioids,
White males and all.
my demographic, the elderly.
Really?
We can't afford the treatment for the pain that we're in. So we get prescribed opioids, and we have a huge addiction problem in my demographic. I don't take them, so that's not me. But I don't even take them when the dentist pulls a tooth and gives me some. I go, thank you, I'll put them on the shelf. And then when there's a drug take back down at the Loveland police station, they go into the bin. It's a major issue. It's becoming it's a hidden issue. Nobody talks about the fact that the elderly are becoming the most addicted people in this country right now. Well, of course they are. But but the treatments, the problem with medicine is we treat symptoms, we don't treat causes. Nor do we encourage healthy lifestyles to try and avoid symptoms. Are some of these avoidable or unavoidable? Yeah, some are. And that's reality. Yeah, right. You live long enough, you're probably going to have it. On the other hand, it's convenient. It's a convenient cause of death excuse for medical errors. So, I saw that with my mother. So, but the issue is that Narcan does work. Another example you probably don't know about is that aspirin and ibuprofen taken together have no effect. They cancel each other out. So you're taking two things that aren't good for you. You're getting no benefit. But
So then why do the fevers?
if you take them both together,
Yeah.
I think we're talking about the pain, the energy,
Oh, okay.
the analgesia that is the other side of those things.
Mom, so my thought is I use them for fevers
Mhm.
because my daughter's not quite old enough yet to tell me when she's really in pain.
Yeah.
Other than, she obviously bonked her head. Is probably gonna have a headache.
Yeah, and then, all right, so she has a head.
Yeah, in which case she gets one or the other. I don't
Yeah,
know.
well, I'm not a fan of even really, I have to have a pretty nasty headache to take those things. And then I take only enough to knock it down to the point that I can go to sleep and sleep Because usually my headaches are completely away. No, because I don't drink and I don't do other things that cause me to get headaches. No. So
If you're pain, don't take them together.
don't take them together. No, you can take them. You can take them separately. Take one now and then, 6 hours later take the other. Probably not a problem. But together, we cancel each other out. Kind of an interesting phenomenon. There's another sort of form of potentiation, in a way, is a negative effect. Tetracycline taken on along with an acid reducer like Protonix or omeprazole or one of those. It will deactivate the tetracycline because it won't absorb out of the nucleus. Well, you're supposed to have an acid. Just take it with food, but not with acid reducer. So, interesting. There's a lot of different kinds of these kinds of interactions. The issue of tolerance. Tolerance is real. Tolerance is when the body doesn't respond to a drug as well as it did. Why does that happen? Well, there's lots of theories. One of them could very easily be that one of the reasons that we have the mechanisms for getting rid of drugs is that we have their foreign substances. But if it's something that's in the body all the time, the body starts recognizing it as natural. It's supposed to be there. The body can be trained, believe it or not. So we start not responding very well to it, not responding properly. We also can get to the point where we have reduced the population of whatever target that has been interacting with to the point where we're just not able, we block it, so we increase the target so that the body is not handling it well. We don't like increasing the drug because that's toxic. So we can develop tolerance. There's lots of mechanisms. Dependence is different. Dependence is there's some physical dependence on drugs. A lot of dependence is psychological. I can't function if I don't take my whatever it is. We ran into that when we started marketing the anxiolytics, Valium, Librium, etc. in the 60s, and discovered that people became addicted to them. They became dependent on them. They couldn't function without them. And that's why their class was Schedule 4 substances. We're supposed to monitor a patient and track their use. So we have that group of possibilities, and then there's just outright physical dependence and withdrawal. You can tell the difference between physical dependence and psychological dependence when you take the drug away. In physical dependence, you go through classic withdrawal symptoms. The tremors, the sweats, the agitation, the things that are not generally seen in psychological dependence. This is where we are with the opioid crisis. We have too many people that have become both physically and psychologically dependent on them. And it's a real debate right now. The ARC publications are constantly harping on this issue now. And opiate deaths, about 60,000 last year in the US. So more than automobile deaths. more than a lot of other causes?
Turning into a heroin. It's cheaper.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
That's good. It's really sad when the dangerous drug is cheaper than the not safe, but
Yeah, right.
the improved
The
drug.
improved product and the product
Yeah.
that does have therapeutic use. Yeah. It is. It's a sad event. Yeah, anyway. Okay. So that's a lot of that material. You need to read over the material. The pharmacology PowerPoint, which I haven't used, obviously, has a lot of information in it that I just gave you in a couple of different ways. I just wanted to, let's see. There's a lot of terminology, and there's a lot of information in that PowerPoint. It's probably worth looking over. It is rather lengthy, but it does have a lot of good information. I'd like to talk a bit about something called bioavailability and bioequivalence. Bioavailability really is what we can do. We know the average plasma volume, and if we give a patient a dose and we measure the amount of then the ratio of that to the dose that we give is bioavailability. So if a drug is 75 that 75% if it's 20%, 20%. Then of course it's metabolite that maximum time when we look at that number. This is the major difference between in the cost of the cost of developing a drug. We have to go through the full process of the drug safe and effective, which costs sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars to develop the clinical trials, system, etc. And that's cost money, which is why drugs exclusivity of limited to the patent mechanism. So they could reduce that setting aside whether they would take right now, that's a different and it depends sort of political and but the issue for the generic equivalent is a lot cheaper because when a generic drug is developed, what the generic manufacturers, all the generic manufacturers have to do is demonstrate that the same dose given of a original product and given a very drug has the same bioavailability. So what we show is that they are equivalent biologically. We assume that that means that they're equivalent. There's a good rationale for that. Is it perfect? Yeah. Not quite. There are some examples of don't seem to work as well as generic. And Dr. McNary absolutely. There were doctors before they were never prescribed because the drugs were awful. In some cases, they wouldn't even do it drug in the packet. It was so badly done. The generic industry seems to have that incredibly well since that and we now pretty much deconstruct the equivalent of, and in fact, many of the large pharmaceutical companies that make versions of their own package for the drug as well. So what a generic company has to do then is a relatively cheap study in a relatively small number of patients just to show that, to say they're making a generic equivalent to Lipitor. They will give a patient a dose of Lipitor and they'll monitor the plasma level, the plasma concentration time curve, and they'll give their generic version, same dose of their generic version of the drug to other patients, obviously not the same patient, but they'll give that to other patients and measure those curves, and they should be superimposable. They should look exactly alike. If that's the case, it's considered equivalent and it can be approved by the and the rationale does work. Originally, the generic companies had to guess at formulation. Now, we have analytical chemistry methods such that it's easy to get an originating drug and run it through some analytical equipment and figure out the exact ratio of every single excipient and so they can duplicate these drugs absolutely perfectly. Not only that, I remember a number of years ago, I think it might have been when Lipitor was getting ready to go off patent. The originator company actually had an internal debate as to whether they were going to become the generic manufacturer of the active ingredient and supply anyone and everyone who wanted it, and or even the generic manufacturer of the dosage form and supply blank pills to anyone who wanted to label it with their own name, and that way they would get a piece of all the active. I don't think they ended up doing it. I think that's but it was an interesting debate. It's something that has been thought in pharmaceutical industry for a while, but I think they decided not to play that. So we have drugs that are we have drugs that we call therapeutic equivalents, meaning they do the same thing. Usually they have to be obviously in the same class of drugs. So we're talking about, two beta blockers that do exactly the same thing, or two antivirals that do exactly the same thing, and that there's no therapeutic difference between them. These are, in some states, it's actually legal for pharmacists to substitute therapeutically equivalent cheaper drugs for prescription drugs. Not too many states, but there's been a movement to do that. Yeah, not very often though. Most of the time, pharmacists aren't going to argue because the generic equivalents of prescribed drugs are pretty much, they're all going to be about the same price. So it's not as big an issue as the pharmaceutical industry thought it was going to be when it first surfaced. They thought they were going to lose out, and pharmacists would automatically prescribe cheaper drugs. Well, pharmacists are aware that many of the older drugs maybe have the same therapeutic effect, but they have higher toxicity rates. So they wouldn't do that. Another big factor is the age of the patient. Most drugs are developed for patients in the 18 to 55 year range. 18 because that's when they can legally sign a consent form to participate in a clinical trial. 55 because that's still shy of being classed as elderly. And what happens in the very young and the very old is exactly this right here, cytochrome P450. In the very young, it's not as well developed, and so it doesn't function very efficiently. So drugs tend not to get metabolized very well in the very young. In the elderly, it has started now to fail. It started to break down. And so they don't metabolize drugs, some drugs, as well as they should. My wife and I keep a pretty close eye on my 98-year-old mother-in-law, who takes a number of drugs, but she's remarkably stable on her drugs. We feel blessed, believe me, that we don't have that to worry about. And she also is capable still of taking her own meds. And yeah, believe me, it is. And that's, yeah. Yep. Yeah.
You may not have to take that. No, I don't. It's for your heart.
Yeah.
I don't have to take it. I was a nurse. I know what I need to take and what I don't need to take. Come on. Okay.
The fact is, she's dying, so why should she have to take it?
No, it was literally just she didn't agree with the doctor. She thought her doctor was an idiot. He was younger than her, and therefore he didn't know what he was doing.
Well, you know, at some point in your life, the doctor. Mine are.
I noticed that, because I've got a lot of diabetic doctors, that it seems like as time goes on, they're getting younger and younger and younger and younger. I mean, there's some that look like they're in their 20s.
They are. Yeah, the doctor that I walked in and I'd just better reevaluate all of
My
But
grandma's issue with one of her doctors was he's too pretty to be a doctor. There's no brains up there.
well, there's a problem. That's the problem. Yes. Also, bodily functions, injuries, especially to the liver, because those are the primary excretion organs. So if the problem's there, you've got a problem. You have to watch. And so renal function is something. Unfortunately, you know, like us with my mother-in-law, I'm working. We have blood work done. So, we have people that are watching. Okay. So let's go back and I want to go back to here. Okay. Like to talk about another assignment, the two assignments for this week. One of them is the ADME assignment. Now you can find that in week 1, and I have a handout for it. And what you're going to do now is actually choose the target for that. And this is going to be a drug off the top 200 list, starting on page 550 of your textbook. And what you're going to do is prepare basically a very quick summary and answer a series of questions. We'll prepare this. Now you can get all the information off several of the sources that we talked about in Pharmacy 208. RxList.com, RPH, the FDA's drug site, Hippocrates has a lot of it. But you'll ask these questions. Now, our book, you turn to page 550, that's a list of brand name drugs. What you may be doing when you do this is do your initial and then do your subsequent work by looking at the what is the brand name for the likely to be somebody. Whereas then, so you want to and be aware that they may have it by contract. And or the we have our pharmaceutical company, we had our research operation, was also incorporated, was and yet the company was very profitable. So it's a little bit different. Usually that's done for business each of the other corporate entities under the umbrella of the company. So I'd like you to pick out a drug off this list. And I would prefer if you pick out a drug you do a report on. Okay? All right, Ellen? Tricor? Okay. Pardon?
Sorry, nothing.
Do you know somebody? Okay. Yeah. Mhm. Ventolin? Okay.
I'll do nitrous stack.
Nitrous oxide? Okay. Okay. Charity? No?
I'm looking still.
Okay.
I don't find something interesting.
You don't have a book? We need to get you a book then. don't know if Nate's here tonight. But he's doing the library. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen him this evening. But that doesn't mean-
Very good at hiding.
That's very true.
Well, but he also knows he can't hide from being in the library. If he can do it.
Can't hide forever.
Yes,
right?
but it's where in the library is he hiding?
Ah, that's-
Like he's just chilling out under his desk.
yeah.
Not today.
No, he'd be under his desk working on a tablet thing or something.
Playing a game on his phone.
Or doing homework. He's doing,
Yeah, that's technology.
I gotta find something interesting.
What's your gas?
Pardon?
Gas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh. I'll be
I'll be interested.
yeah. That's right. So,
I've had a lot of problems, supposedly. I fixed a few.
Supposedly.
I think the only good
Kill it prior.
yeah. Option. On this list,
I'll do the Novolin 7030.
Novelin 70.
I know about the different insulins, but I don't know about that one, so.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a mixing. Okay. Okay. So that's settled. So let's talk about the next aspect. We'll talk more about antibiotics, anti-infectives in the class. So one of the assignments is so I'll pass that out.
Or are we not doing it on the computer?
It's a good worksheet. Okay, you can do it on the computer, in fact, that would be a lot better. But this is a good worksheet because you need to be looking at what you want to write. But
No, this is due before Saturday.
Sunday,
Makes sense.
So would you want us to,
It says
do
that
it on here and then transfer it to the Word
you can do it either way. You can do it either way. If you want to bring it in and hand it to me in hard copy.
Oh,
That's how.
Oh, yeah, you got it.
Okay, thanks.
If it comes in late Sunday, I probably won't be writing it. So here we have a number of antibiotics are, generally speaking, antibacterial. There is very little crossover in activity between the various kinds of in terms of the type of organism. So antibiotics, some antibiotics will have some effect on some other kinds of organisms. But for the most part, they're pretty silent by because of their physiology. So But there are lots of different targets that you can attack. There's just probably a number of microbiology. Lots of different targets can be attacked by drugs. And often we will use combinations of drugs to make sure that we have a better way of dealing with drugs that are developing resistance. Rarely do we see drugs that develop resistance to an antibiotic develop broad spectrum resistance. They have been treated and treated and treated and have developed resistance to all of the mechanisms. Rarely, but it does happen that when the drug is treated with one antibiotic becomes resistant, switch from different antibiotics treated. Occasionally, what happens is the resistance to the new antibiotic will cause the now susceptible to the old. This has happened a few times. Usually, what happens is they become more and more resistant. We're starting with tuberculosis to now find strains of tuberculosis that are resistant to everything we have, which is kind of scary. We're starting to see it here in India and elsewhere on the planet. So we're starting to see a few cases in the United States. We call this extremely drug resistant. We've gone from multi-drug resistant to extremely drug resistant. And now we have strains that are sort of maybe a blow. But
I fail to see the problem with it.
kind of rough on the patient.
A little bit. Okay.
Kind of rough on the patient. But we have a couple of things. MOA is mechanism of action. Okay. Name recognition. Remember the handout that I gave you in Pro 8 that talks about generic names and the suffix that tell us what kind of drugs they are, what kind of mechanisms of action they might have. To go back to Emily's case for the ADME project, she chose fenofibrate, which is a different class of anti-cholesterol drugs from the currently very popular statin drugs. And they work by very different mechanisms of action. So name recognition could be as in the fillings, that's obviously the first one there. Virtually every derivative of penicillin or other analog of penicillin has these fillings. And there's a boatload of them, many of which we don't see in this country. Cautions, basically, what are the issues that can arise from using drugs? I'll give you a hint. With penicillin, there is a very high rate of allergy.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell it all.
Yeah, I think I am too. I won't touch it anymore. Penicillin and sulfate.
I'm gonna
So.
penicillin, Bactrim, septin, and sulfur.
My husband's allergic to the penicillins,
Yeah.
all of the cillins, and one of the doctors didn't believe us when we told him and said, "Oh, you probably just have an egg allergy." And we're sitting there going, "No, he's tested. Like, this is not just us saying it. We have tests." So they still gave him the cillin.
And he had a reaction.
That doctor felt like an idiot. Well, it's like, I understand there are a lot of people that will sit there and go, "Oh, I'm allergic to that. I can't have it." In restaurants and stuff like that. But when it comes to medicine, I find that people are less likely to tell you that they have an allergy to a medication unless they're actually allergic to it.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, drug example, you don't need to list every single drug. The largest group of drugs that we have, right? You found it.
I found it.
Yep. The largest group of drugs we have is if you look at it, you end up giving out more. Um, you just think you're getting a lot more. And the condition is treated. Well, some cases, this is what antibiotics. But if there are specific named diseases or specific families of bacteria that are susceptible, then go ahead and list those. Others, I love others because there are other families. Do a list for other types of drugs, because there are a few others. These are the major antibiotics that we see. And they increase in part it's been a long time since I've been in practice, so I've been surprised at the fact that we can't get more and more anti-infective drugs. And one of the reasons is dealing with this. A few years ago, some of the drug companies were telling us that they felt that we were never going to have a better antibiotic than we had now. It seems to be as they learn more and more about the mechanism here. But note that we have, in terms of this, we have the word anti in the name here. Let's just look at that. Anti means against. So we have lots and lots of drug classes, and we saw from that list on the drug class list that many of those drugs are antiseptic, antihypertensive, anti-cholesterolemic, the hypertensive. So there's anti is a common prefix. That just means that we treat diseases in a specific area. We're going to concentrate on the different antibiotic families, and there are many, many of them, as I said, that have been found since the old days when the anti-infective drug that the first of them was penicillin, followed very quickly by the sulfanilamide. And you all remember the video about sulfanilamide from one of your classes. It might have been Pharmacy 200, Elixir of Death. Yeah, Elixir of Death. You all remember that that particular video and the story that it told about how lax the regulation was for drugs in general, and how it led to basically the creation of the modern Food and Drug Administration. The term, we apply that to a number of drugs, and again, we look at the classification of drugs by what they treat as one. We can look at drugs a lot of different ways, but what I'm trying to do is get to the point. Here we go. So we have, in terms of anti-infective drugs, we have a large number of antifungals, systemic, topical, um, and even injectable, although we don't need them generally. But there are a couple like amphotericin B that is often given by injection. It is one nasty drug, but it's the only thing that can treat some fungal infection. So we have antifungal. Well, it can treat some of the really serious lung fungal infection. It's used for that. I worked for a company that actually developed a theoretically safer form of the drug, and we got a call from the University of Cincinnati. They had a series with pulmonary and acid pulmonary acid. We saw of fungal matter. It's essentially so they were asking samples to treat these things. So we took them to this is what's doing the pharmaceutical. I was actually trying license pharmaceutical company. And so I came over and be very close attention when we and it was amazing. Some of the cases, this was basically online. It was sort of like giving somebody who had a drug that might keep them alive all day. So, needless to say, they liked that. They liked that result. But it was really good. They also made a good friend out of the head of that. It was worth it. That's what pharmaceutical companies will do when they have drugs in trial and they hears about it. Pretty much, if it's all legal, we'll do it. We'll guide the drug because we always have protocol in place with the FDA that allows us to try selected patients with drug when there's no other therapy. And that was the case. Of course, we had to have permission from the Japanese government that was the head of the medical school at South, as you can imagine. So we didn't have any trouble with that. But we do, but there are drugs that are really, really nasty. Given any other way, the amphotericin had so many side effects that it's a black box drug, has a black box warning. And but given our formulation, it was much safer. So especially to put in the lung. Okay. Mechanism of action or mode of action. Okay. Okay. Okay, so let's. So we have lots and lots of anti-infective drugs. Antiparasitic drugs. The antifungals, there are lots and lots of different antifungals. Fungal diseases range all the way from the sort of, nuisance benign things like athlete's foot to things that can be really serious. Candidiasis, systemic fungal infections, pulmonary fungal infections. And so the drug mechanisms usually work by disrupting the cell wall of these fungal organisms. There are other mechanisms too, but the most common one is disruption of cell wall synthesis. Fungal diseases are difficult to treat because our drugs don't necessarily kill directly, but what they do is prevent the reproduction of the fungus. So things like nail bed fungal infections, which are fairly common, are usually treated by taking an oral antifungal drug for an extended period of time, up to a year, and then suppressing the reproduction of the fungal organism while the toenail grows out and basically gets rid of it that way. And once that toenail has grown out and you've gotten rid of the fungal infection, you can stop taking the drug. Okay, so that's not an uncommon thing. With things like athlete's foot, and ringworm and things like that, we basically will give a product for a short period of time that will treat the organism. Most of the antifungal drugs can be classed as either fungicidal. Some of them actually do kill the fungus, but they're mostly fungistatic, meaning they stop the reproduction. So that's why sometimes we have to take drugs for long periods of time for serious infections. A lot of times these infections, the really serious fungal infections, will show up in patients that are immune compromised. One of the things that would kill AIDS patients often were fungal infections that you and I wouldn't even know we had. But their immune systems were incapable of dealing with it. So we'd have to watch very carefully. We have a class of drugs, antiparasitics. Parasites are any organism that lives on or in. We normally think of single cell organisms, but it's the only place we really study what we call helminths, worms. And helminths are bookworm, that sort of thing. Yeah, and also some of the bloodworms, Charybdis, which is heartworms mainly in pets, mainly dogs, carried by mosquito, can also be found in people.
Had heartworm, and their best assumption was that because he owned a big property that had deer on it, that he somehow contracted it from them.
That's not nice. But other parasites are things like malaria, and leishmaniasis. These are diseases we don't see that much here. Malaria used to be endemic in North America. In fact, when the first European settlers came here, many of them died from malaria. And even as late as the Revolutionary War here in the United States, the property that was deeded over by the state of Maryland to become the federal district, the District of Columbia, was described as a useless malarious swamp. And I've always thought that sounds like what it is today.
So it hasn't changed much.
Yeah, but that's basically how it's got. So we've had malaria. Malaria actually was also one of the organisms that one way or another was used to wipe out Native American population inland from the coast, especially the Comanche, the Sioux, the Apache were very susceptible. The Arapaho, all the Plains Indians. It would come with the settlers who came in from the coast of Texas and brought malaria with them. It was the fourth of the main pests that was used to devastate the American Indian population. So I guess it's about time to quit. So I'll get started on looking at the discussion. We talked about the various aspects of ADME, and that's what the discussion is about. Get started on the other projects as well. We'll meet again on Wednesday. Same bat time, same bat. Sure. Huh? I would assume that you're writing this after you, for after graduation. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, make that assumption, because really, we're planning on you using this resume when you graduate, when you actually get your degree. So do you know when you're graduating? August, okay. Still have a few more classes.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Good, I'm glad to hear it.